The Duke of Blackwood had spent 32 years believing that every problem could be solved by money, influence, or silence. Then, one winter evening, beneath the chandeliers of Lady Pembroke's ballroom, he discovered there was one thing in England his title could not command: a woman's trust. Clara Whitmore stood less than 20 feet away. She wore a simple blue gown Lady Pembroke had insisted she borrow for the evening. There were no diamonds around her throat. No aristocratic name followed hers. No fortune waited behind her smile. And yet nearly every eye in the ballroom had turned toward her. Not because she belonged there. According to half the room, she did not. They were watching because Alexander Blackwood, 8th Duke of Blackwood, had just crossed the ballroom, ignored the daughters of 3 noble families, and stopped directly in front of the woman who had once entered his house through the servant's door. His mother had gone pale. Lady Victoria Harcourt, the woman London had once expected him to marry, stood perfectly still beside a marble column. Whispers moved through the crowd. Alexander held out his hand. "Dance with me." The musicians faltered. Someone gasped. Clara looked at his hand but did not take it. Months earlier, she would have. Months earlier, she had believed that the smallest kindness from him meant more than it did. She had believed that because he listened when she spoke, because he smiled differently around her, because he had once looked at her as though the room contained no one else, he might be brave enough to stand beside her when standing beside her became difficult. She had been wrong. Now her expression was calm. That frightened Alexander more than anger would have. "Please," he said. Clara lifted her eyes to his. "I think you have mistaken me for someone who still waits for you, Your Grace." Then she walked past him. For the first time in his life, the Duke of Blackwood stood before an entire ballroom with absolutely no idea what to do. 3 seasons earlier, Clara Whitmore had possessed exactly 11 shillings, 2 serviceable dresses, 1 pair of boots with a split in the left sole, and a mother whose cough had worsened with the cold. She also possessed something poverty had failed to take from her: pride. Not the foolish kind. Clara had scrubbed floors, mended linen, carried coal, peeled potatoes, washed shirts until her hands cracked in winter, and once spent an entire night helping a neighboring farmer save lambs during a storm. She was not ashamed of work. She was ashamed only of cruelty. Her father had been the village schoolmaster before illness took him. He taught Clara to read before she could properly reach the table. By 14, she had read Shakespeare, Milton, parts of Homer in translation, several books on mathematics, and almost everything that passed through the little schoolhouse library. Her father used to say, "Poverty can empty a purse, Clara. Never let it empty your mind." When he died, the schoolhouse passed to another teacher. Clara and her mother moved into a 2-room cottage at the edge of Blackwood land. For 4 years, Clara took whatever work she could find. Then her mother's health worsened. Medicine cost money. Food cost money. Coal cost money. Good intentions paid for none of them. So when Blackwood Hall advertised for extra household staff before a large winter gathering, Clara walked 5 miles through melting snow to apply. Mrs. Henshaw, the housekeeper, examined her carefully. "You have never worked in a great house." "No, ma'am." "You understand service requires obedience?" "Yes." "You will be expected to know your place." Clara hesitated. Mrs. Henshaw raised one eyebrow. Clara answered carefully, "I understand that I am being hired to work, ma'am, if that is what you mean." The housekeeper almost dismissed her then and there. Instead, something in Clara's face made her pause. "Kitchen maid," Mrs. Henshaw said at last. "Temporary. 6 weeks to begin." Clara smiled. "Thank you." She started the next morning. She expected never to speak to the Duke. For nearly 2 weeks, she did not. Then a storm changed everything. Rain had begun before sunrise and worsened through the afternoon. By evening, the road beyond the eastern wood had become almost impassable. Clara had received permission to visit the village apothecary after her duties. She was returning with a small packet of medicine for her mother when she heard a hoarse scream. Not neigh. Scream. She stopped. Another sound followed. A man's curse. Clara left the road and pushed through wet branches. 20 yards ahead, a black stallion struggled beside a fallen tree. Its reins had twisted around a broken branch. A man lay partly beneath the saddle, one leg trapped awkwardly beneath the horse. Clara recognized him immediately. The Duke of Blackwood. His coat was soaked through. Blood ran from a cut above his eyebrow. The stallion kicked wildly. Clara's first instinct was fear. Her second was action. Do not move. Alexander turned his head. Even half-trapped beneath a horse, he looked offended at being ordered. What? Stop pulling your leg. You're frightening him. You are telling me how to manage my own horse. Yes. The stallion jerked again. Alexander clenched his jaw. Clara moved slowly toward the animal. Easy. The horse's eyes rolled. Easy boy. She had grown up around farm animals. Not fine bloodstock, perhaps, but frightened creatures obeyed fear long before they obeyed rank. She reached for the reins. Alexander watched her. You'll be kicked. Possibly. That is not reassuring. Then stop speaking. His expression would have been almost comical under different circumstances. Clara freed one section of leather from the branch. The horse shifted. Alexander inhaled sharply. Your leg? She asked. Still attached. Wonderful. She worked at the next twist in the reins. This would proceed faster if your grace had not wrapped half the forest around himself. I shall remember that next time I fall from a horse. There must not be a next time. Something changed in his face. Was he amused? Clara could not tell. At last the reins came free. The stallion lurched upright and away from Alexander. He rolled onto his back. For several seconds neither moved. Rain hammered the leaves above them. Clara knelt beside him. Can you stand? I am perfectly capable, he tried. His injured leg folded beneath him. Clara caught his arm. Clearly. I bruised the knee. I believe it may be worse than bruised. My horse. More sensible than his owner, apparently. Alexander stared at her. Then, despite the rain, pain, and blood, he laughed. It was the first time Clara had ever seen him do it. They reached an abandoned shepherd's cottage shortly before darkness. Alexander could barely put weight on his injured leg. Clara found dry kindling stored beneath a bench and coaxed a fire to life. She tore a strip from the inner hem of her petticoat and cleaned the wound above his eyebrow. You have ruined your dress, he said. It was already old. I will replace it. No, his brows rose. No, you did not tear it. You used it because of me. I used it because your head was bleeding. That generally establishes some connection. Clara looked at him. Not every kindness is a debt, your grace. He became quiet. The sentence followed him long after estate riders found them 2 hours later. The next morning, the physician confirmed Alexander had badly sprained his knee but broken nothing. Clara returned immediately to the kitchens. By noon, every servant knew what she had done. By evening, so did the Duchess. 3 days later, Clara was summoned upstairs. She entered the library with nervous hands clasped behind her back. Alexander sat near the fire, his injured leg extended before him. You wish to see me, your grace? I understand you have been working in the kitchens. Yes. Why? Clara blinked. For wages. He frowned. I meant why Blackwood Hall? My mother is ill. And you support her? Yes. Alexander reached toward a small table. An envelope lay there. Take it. Clara did not move. What is it? Enough money for your mother's physician and whatever else she requires. How much? That hardly matters. It matters to me. His expression tightened slightly. You saved my life. I helped you out from beneath a horse. A distinction without significance. I do not want payment. Everyone wants payment for something. The words came too easily. Perhaps because nearly everyone in Alexander's life did. Clara felt the first flicker of disappointment. I don't. He studied her. Then what do you want? My wages. Anything else? Yes. His eyebrows rose. I would like tomorrow afternoon free, so I can take my mother to the physician. For a moment he simply stared. Then he laughed softly. Granted. Clara curtsied. Thank you. Miss Whitmore. She turned. Alexander tapped the envelope. What shall I do with this? Give it to someone who did not ask for it, but truly needs it. Then she left. 2 weeks later, repairs began on the leaking roof of the village school. The money came through the estate office with no public announcement. Clara knew exactly whose order had made it possible. She never thanked him. Strangely, Alexander appreciated that. One rainy afternoon, she was cataloging books in the library when he entered unexpectedly. She climbed down from a ladder. Your Grace. What are you doing? Lady Eleanor asked me to arrange the books. By color. Clara looked horrified. No, excellent. We may continue speaking. She almost smiled. He approached the table. A book lay open. Adam Smith. You sound surprised. I am. That is not very flattering. Most young ladies I know prefer poetry. I am not most young ladies. No, Alexander said quietly. You are not. The air between them changed. Clara looked down. He looked away first. From then on, their conversations became more frequent. Some were accidental, some were not. Their affection grew in quiet places. The library, the greenhouse, the path along the river when Eleanor walked with them as propriety required. Clara never flirted with him. That made him notice every smile. Alexander never spoke to her as though she were ignorant. That made Clara forget, sometimes, how impossible everything was. Then Lady Victoria Harcourt arrived. She was beautiful, elegant, wealthy. Her father, the Earl of Rothbury, controlled several votes Alexander needed for a reform bill concerning military pensions. Years earlier, both families had quietly assumed Alexander and Victoria might eventually marry. No formal engagement existed, but London society rarely required one before building an entire future from expectation. Clara learned of those expectations within an hour of Victoria's arrival. Two maids were whispering in the corridor. The Duchess invited her especially. They say the match may finally be settled before Christmas. Clara continued walking. She felt nothing. At least that was what she told herself. That evening, she brought correspondence to Eleanor in the drawing room. Alexander stood beside the fireplace. Victoria sat near him. They looked correct together. Painfully correct. Victoria wore ivory silk and pearls. Clara wore gray wool. The difference between their worlds had never been clearer. Alexander's gaze found Clara. She lowered hers immediately. That frightened him. After dinner, he found her in the conservatory. You avoided me all evening. I was working. You looked at me once. I did not know I was required to keep count. Clara. It was the first time he had used her Christian name. She stopped. Alexander seemed to realize it too. Lady Victoria is a guest, he said. Clara forced a smile. She appears very pleasant. You do not believe that. I have no opinion. You always have an opinion. Then perhaps I am learning discretion. He stepped closer. Why? Clara's composure cracked. Because I know what I am. His face changed. What does that mean? It means I work in your house. You work for Eleanor. In your house. That does not define you. It defines what happens if people begin noticing the way you speak to me. Alexander said nothing. Clara continued. You may enjoy ignoring rules, Your Grace. Rules have never punished you. The words landed hard. They punish people like me. I would never allow anyone to harm you. She looked up. That is precisely the problem. What? You believe you can protect me from consequences without admitting that you create them. Alexander stared at her. Clara stepped back. Good night, Your Grace. He caught her wrist. Not harshly, only enough to stop her. She looked down at his hand. He released her immediately. I am sorry. Clara nodded. Then she left. Alexander did not sleep that night, and scandal eventually reached Victoria. She confronted Clara near the breakfast room. Two ladies stood nearby. You are Miss Whitmore? Clara curtsied. Yes, my lady. Victoria examined her. I understand you are very clever. I do not know who told you that. The Duke seems entertained by you. Clara said nothing. Victoria smiled. You misunderstand his attention. I have made no claim regarding his grace. Good. The women beside Victoria exchanged glances. Victoria stepped closer. Men like Alexander sometimes become fascinated by unusual things. A clever servant. A beautiful actress. A horse no one else can ride. Clara's cheeks burned. The fascination passes. Clara looked directly at her. I hope, for your sake, that you are correct. Victoria's smile disappeared. That should have been the end. It was not. The following evening, Clara assisted Eleanor at dinner because Eleanor's maid had taken ill. A guest asked how Eleanor had enjoyed a recent lecture on poor relief. Eleanor, without malice, mentioned that Clara had challenged several of the lecturer's conclusions. Victoria laughed softly. Perhaps we should ask Miss Whitmore. I understand she has become Blackwood's resident expert on poverty. Several people smiled. Clara froze. Alexander's expression hardened. Victoria continued. Tell us, Miss Whitmore, do poor families genuinely require charity? Or does generosity simply encourage laziness? The table became quiet. It was a trap. Clara knew it. Alexander spoke. Victoria, Clara answered first. Some poor families are lazy, my lady. Victoria smiled triumphantly. Just as some wealthy families are. The smile vanished. A gentleman coughed into his glass. Clara continued calmly. Money changes circumstances. I have never observed that it reliably changes character. Eleanor lowered her eyes to hide a smile. Alexander stared at Clara. Victoria's face colored. You speak boldly for someone in service. Clara met her gaze. Poverty has already taken most things from me, my lady. I see little reason to give it my voice as well. Silence. Then Alexander's elderly uncle laughed. A genuine, booming laugh. Several others followed. Victoria was humiliated. Humiliation seeks somewhere to place its pain. The next morning, Victoria's diamond bracelet disappeared. Servants searched guest rooms, corridors, and common areas first. Victoria insisted her maid had last seen the bracelet after Clara delivered a shawl to her dressing room on Eleanor's behalf. Clara denied touching it. The Duchess of Blackwood, anxious to contain scandal, ordered the servants' rooms searched as well. An hour later, the bracelet was found beneath folded linen in Clara's small room, wrapped in one of her own handkerchiefs. Clara stared at it. I have never seen that bracelet. Mrs. Henshaw looked devastated. Victoria stood at the end of the corridor. How unfortunate. Clara turned toward Alexander. He had arrived moments earlier. Their eyes met. This was the moment. She would later remember everything about it. The winter light, the ticking of a distant clock, the bracelet glittering against white cloth, and Alexander's silence. Tell them, Clara whispered. He looked at her. She stepped closer. You know I did not take it. Victoria spoke. Alexander, surely you cannot. Quiet. He looked again at Clara, but he hesitated. Only for seconds. Seconds were enough. Clara's face changed. Something inside her closed. Alexander saw it happen. Clara, do you believe me? Every person in the corridor became still. Alexander knew what his heart answered. Yes. Immediately. Completely. But he also saw Victoria. Her father's political influence. His mother. The guests. The scandal. The possibility that declaring Clara innocent before any proof was found would turn rumor into open accusation that he favored a servant because of personal feelings. Instead of saying the one word Clara needed, he chose caution. We must establish exactly what happened. Clara stared at him. Then she nodded. Of course. Mrs. Henshaw protested that Clara had worked honestly since her arrival. Eleanor demanded that no one dismiss her. But the Duchess, terrified of further scandal while the investigation continued, ordered Clara suspended from duties and confined to the servants' wing until the guests departed. Alexander objected privately. He insisted the suspension was temporary. To Clara, the distinction no longer mattered. That afternoon she packed one small bag. Mrs. Henshaw tried to stop her. Eleanor cried, You do not have to leave. Clara embraced her. Yes, I do. At the servants' entrance, Alexander waited. Snow fell beyond him. I will discover the truth. Clara pulled on her gloves. You already knew the truth. That is not fair. No. I had an entire household watching me. Yes. My mother was demanding an investigation. Yes. Rothbury controls votes I need for, yes. Clara, listen to me. She finally looked at him. I was listening. Her voice trembled. That was my mistake. He fell silent. You told me my position did not define me. You told me I should not be frightened of other people's judgment. And the first moment their judgment became inconvenient for you, you stood among them. I did not accuse you. You did something worse. Her eyes filled. You doubted me politely. Alexander flinched. Clara picked up her bag. Goodbye, Your Grace. Where will you go? Home. I can arrange a carriage. No. Your mother requires medicine. I said no. He stared at her. Clara's voice softened. If you give me money now, you will tell yourself it is kindness. What is it then? Guilt. She walked into the snow. Alexander remained in the doorway long after she disappeared. Clara reached the cottage before dusk. Her mother's health had deteriorated sharply. For 2 days Clara barely slept. On the third morning, just before sunrise, Margaret Whitmore died with her daughter holding her hand. Clara buried her beside her husband in the village churchyard. Blackwood Hall learned of the death through the rector. Alexander rode to the cottage that afternoon. The door was locked. A neighbor approached. Miss Whitmore. Yes. She left after the burial, Your Grace. His stomach dropped. Where? Yorkshire. Her mother's sister owns a small dressmaking shop outside York. Alexander closed his eyes. He had imagined many ways to apologize. None included learning that while he protected his reputation, Clara had buried her mother, believing herself unwanted in his house. He returned to Blackwood Hall after dark. Before he could confront Victoria, Mrs. Henshaw requested an urgent audience. Victoria's maid, Lucy had confessed. The bracelet had been planted. Victoria had ordered her to hide it in Clara's room after the previous evening's humiliation. Lucy had obeyed out of fear she would lose her position. When news arrived that Clara's mother had died, guilt finally overcame her. Alexander confronted Victoria in the blue drawing room. You planted it. Victoria did not deny it. She needed to leave. You accused an innocent woman of theft. A servant. Alexander's face became still. Victoria immediately knew she had made a mistake. She would have ruined everything, she said. People were laughing at me because of her. Get out. Alexander. Leave my house. You cannot mean any discussion of marriage between our families is over. Victoria stared at him. Our families, over. My father will withdraw support from your bill. Then he will withdraw it. Your mother will never accept. I no longer care. Victoria laughed bitterly. You care now? How noble. Where was this courage when that girl needed it? Alexander said nothing, because there was no answer. Victoria walked toward the door. Then she stopped. You think dismissing me makes you a better man? No, for once, Alexander understood exactly what he was. It only proves I was capable of choosing correctly after there was nothing left to risk. Victoria left. The words stayed. So Alexander did not follow Clara to Yorkshire. Not yet. He changed what he could change without expecting her to witness any of it. He reopened the village school his father had closed years earlier when costs rose. He established a small widow's allowance on the estate. He replaced the estate manager after the audit revealed years of unnecessary penalties and inflated rents. He began attending tenant meetings personally. When his mother complained that a duke should not concern himself with cottages, drainage ditches, and the price of seed grain, Alexander answered, a duke who collects their rent should concern himself with the roof above their children. London noticed. Society assumed the failed Harcourt match had made him eccentric. Alexander let them think it. Clara, meanwhile, reached Yorkshire exhausted and grieving. Her aunt, Martha Bell, owned a modest dressmaking shop and gave Clara the small room above it. 3 months later, Clara returned to London, not as a servant, as Lady Pembroke's secretary and assistant in a growing network of schools for girls. Almost a year had passed since she left Blackwood. Eleanor learned of Clara's return through a mutual charity committee. She told Alexander, I found her. He stood so quickly his chair struck the wall. Where? London. He stared at his sister. She is working with Lady Pembroke. Doing what? Eleanor smiled. Apparently Lady Pembroke discovered Clara was rather wasted sorting dresses. Alexander saw Clara again at a public lecture on education. She stood beside Lady Pembroke. Her dress was simple blue. Her hair was pinned differently. She looked older. Not in years. In certainty. Alexander could not move. Clara turned. Their eyes met. For one impossible second, the room disappeared. Then she curtsied. Your Grace. Miss Whitmore. That was all. He wanted to tell her everything. Instead he asked, Are you well? I am. I heard about your work. A faint smile. I hope the reports were favorable. They were inadequate. Something flickered in her expression. Alexander continued. I am sorry about your mother. Clara looked away. Thank you. I came to the cottage. I heard. I should have, please. He stopped. Clara looked at him. I do not hate you. He almost wished she did. Hating someone takes a great deal of energy. I needed mine for other things. Alexander swallowed. Can you forgive me? Her expression became sad. I already have. Hope moved through him. Then she finished. But forgiveness is not the same as trust. He nodded slowly. I know. That surprised her. He bowed. I will not trouble you. And he walked away. It was the first thing Alexander did that made Clara reconsider him. He kept his promise. He did not send flowers. He did not write dramatic letters. He did not use Eleanor to plead his case. That mattered. Autumn brought them together again. A fever spread through one of the poorest London districts. Lady Pembroke organized food and medical assistance. Clara volunteered. So did Alexander. She saw him carrying crates through mud. His expensive coat disappeared on the first day. By the third, his boots were ruined. An elderly woman shouted at him because her medicine had arrived late. Alexander apologized. Clara nearly laughed. That evening they sat outside the temporary clinic. You have mud on your face, she said. He wiped the wrong cheek. The other side. He tried again. Clara laughed. Alexander went still. It was the first time he had heard that sound directed toward him in nearly a year. Clara realized it too. Her smile faded. I miss that, he said. She looked down. You should not say things like that. Why? Because I do not know what to do with them. You do not have to do anything. Silence. Then Alexander said, I loved you very selfishly. Clara turned toward him. I believed loving you meant wanting you near me, wanting you to smile at me, wanting you to choose me. He looked at his hands. I never asked whether I was becoming someone safe for you to choose. Clara said nothing. I cannot undo what happened. No. I cannot make your mother's last days different. Her eyes filled. No. I cannot return the trust you gave me. No, Alexander nodded. But I can spend the rest of my life being the man I should have been before I ask anyone to believe I have changed. Clara stared at him. Are you asking me to wait for you? No, his answer came instantly. You have waited enough. That was the second thing that changed her heart. Lady Pembroke held a grand December ball to raise funds for the girls' schools. Clara had never expected to attend, but the Countess insisted. You helped build this work. You will stand beside me when we raise money for it. So Clara wore the blue gown. The ballroom filled. Nobility arrived. So did the Duchess of Blackwood. Lady Victoria Harcourt appeared with friends. Alexander arrived later with Eleanor. Clara felt his presence before she saw him. Victoria noticed. During supper, several women gathered near Clara. Victoria approached. I confess, Miss Whitmore, London never ceases to surprise me. Clara remained calm. In what respect? A servant becomes secretary to a countess. Next, perhaps England shall elect chimney sweeps to Parliament. The women laughed. Clara smiled. I believe some chimney sweeps might improve attendance. One woman choked on her wine. Victoria's eyes narrowed. You still mistake wit for breeding. And you still mistake breeding for character. The laughter stopped. Victoria stepped closer. No gown changes what you are. Clara's heart pounded. Before she could answer, another voice spoke. No, Alexander. Everyone turned. The Duke of Blackwood stood behind them. Victoria smiled thinly. Alexander. He ignored her. His eyes were on Clara. No gown changes what she is. Whispers began. Alexander continued. She was courageous when I was cowardly. His mother went pale across the room. She was honest when honesty cost her employment and reputation. More people turned. She showed compassion when she had almost nothing. Clara stared at him. Alexander faced the room. And when she was falsely accused beneath my roof, I failed her because I valued the comfort and approval of people like us more than the truth I already knew. Silence consumed the ballroom. Victoria whispered, Have you lost your mind? Alexander looked at her. No, I lost something far more valuable because I was afraid of losing your father's approval and my own reputation. Then he turned back to Clara. He crossed the ballroom. He stopped before the poor schoolmaster's daughter everyone once believed beneath him. He held out his hand. Dance with me. Clara stared at it. Once she would have taken it immediately. Now she understood herself better. I think you have mistaken me for someone who still waits for you, Your Grace. She walked away. Alexander lowered his hand. No anger. No pursuit. No command. Only acceptance. Clara reached the conservatory before tears came. She hated them. Not because she was unhappy. Because part of her had desperately wanted to take his hand. The door opened behind her. Alexander stopped several feet away. I said I would not trouble you. You did. I will leave. Wait. He stopped. Clara turned. Why did you do that? Because it was true. You humiliated Victoria. No. I corrected myself. You embarrassed your mother. She has survived worse. Despite herself, Clara smiled. Alexander's expression softened. She became serious again. You did not have to tell them everything. Yes, I did. Why? Because my silence hurt you publicly. His voice lowered. My apology should not exist only in private. Clara looked away. Alexander stepped no closer. I am not asking you for anything. That makes it very difficult to remain angry with you. I apologize. She laughed through tears. You see? You are doing it again. What? Making me laugh when I intend to be furious. I can leave. No, the word came softly. Alexander froze. Clara looked at him. I do not know if I can trust you the way I once did. I know. I do not know whether loving you would be wise. I know. I am still angry. I should hope so. She almost smiled. And I will not become your secret. Never. I will not spend my life being grateful because a duke decided a poor woman was worthy of him. Alexander's eyes held hers. No, he stepped closer then. Only one step. If there is gratitude, Clara, it will be mine. Her breath caught. You saved my life beneath a fallen horse. His voice became quiet. Then you saved it again by refusing to let me remain the man I was. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Alexander did not touch her, not until she reached for him. Her fingers closed around his hand. He looked down as though he could hardly believe it. One dance, she whispered. His eyes lifted. One. Do not become greedy. A smile slowly appeared. I am a duke. Greed is practically hereditary. Clara laughed. They returned to the ballroom hand in hand. By spring, she had also returned to Blackwood Village for the first time since her mother's death. Alexander did not rush her. They visited her parents' graves. He stood several steps away while she laid wild roses against the stone. Only when Clara reached for his hand did he come closer. Afterward, they walked toward the eastern wood where they had first truly met. The old shepherd's cottage remained. Alexander had ordered the roof repaired for estate workers, but changed little else. Inside, a small fire burned. Clara looked around. You planned this. I attempted to. That sounds dangerous. I had a speech. Oh dear. It was quite good. I am sure. I have forgotten almost all of it. Clara smiled. Then perhaps say what you mean. Alexander looked at her for a long moment. All right. He took her hand. I cannot promise you that being Duchess of Blackwood will be easy. Clara's smile faded. People will judge you. Some will never accept you. My mother will occasionally drive you mad. Frequently. Almost certainly. He smiled. But I promise no one will ever again make you stand alone while I protect my comfort. Clara's eyes filled. I cannot promise never to fail you. He swallowed. But I promise never to hide behind my title when I do. He lowered himself onto one knee. Clara covered her mouth. Alexander held out a simple ring. Not enormous. Not chosen to impress London. Clara Whitmore, I loved you first because you were fearless enough to argue with me. She laughed. I loved you next because you saw people I had trained myself not to see. His eyes shone. And somewhere along the way, I realized I do not want a woman who merely fits into my world. He took a breath. I want to build a life where you never have to become smaller to stand beside me. Clara cried then. Completely. Unashamedly. Alexander waited. Finally she whispered. Yes. He stood. Is that yes to the speech? Yes. The proposal? Yes. The argument about the novel? No, unreasonable woman. She pulled him toward her. Arrogant duke. Then she kissed him. Their wedding took place in the village church. Not Westminster Abbey. Not St. George's. Clara insisted. The villagers filled every pew. Farmers stood beside aristocrats. Teachers sat beside footmen. Mrs. Henshaw cried from beginning to end. Eleanor cried louder. Before the ceremony, the Duchess of Blackwood asked to speak with Clara alone. For several uncomfortable seconds, neither woman spoke. Then the Duchess said, I was wrong about you. Clara waited. The older woman swallowed. And worse, I taught my son that reputation mattered more than courage. Clara's expression softened. I think he has unlearned that lesson. Yes. The Duchess looked toward the church where Alexander waited. He has. She hesitated. I do not expect forgiveness. Clara smiled gently. Then perhaps we can begin without expectation. The Duchess nodded. It was not affection. Not yet. But it was honest. Honest beginnings mattered. Alexander waited at the altar. When Clara entered, sunlight passed through stained glass windows and fell across her simple ivory gown. She carried wild roses, the same flowers that had grown beside her mother's cottage. Alexander forgot how to breathe. The poor girl who had once entered Blackwood Hall through the servants' door walked toward him while half the county watched. But Clara did not feel watched. She saw only him, a man who had once failed her, a man who had not demanded forgiveness, a man who had changed when he believed she might never return to witness it. When she reached the altar, Alexander whispered, You came. Clara smiled. This time I chose to. His eyes filled. That was the difference. Many years later, Alexander and Clara attended another London ball. She was no longer nervous in crowded rooms. She was Duchess of Blackwood now, though she remained stubbornly unimpressed by the title. Alexander found her near a window watching several young ladies dance. He offered his hand. Your Grace. Clara raised an eyebrow. That sounds suspiciously formal. I am attempting to seduce a duchess. Dangerous occupation. I have experience. She placed her hand in his. As they stepped onto the dance floor, Alexander noticed Lady Victoria across the ballroom. Older now. Married. She looked toward them only briefly. Clara never noticed. That chapter of her life no longer held enough importance to demand her attention. Alexander smiled. What? Clara asked. Nothing. That expression is never nothing. He drew her closer as the music began. I was remembering the first time I asked you to dance. You looked terrified. I was. You deserved to be. I did. And I refused you. Publicly. Clara smiled. You survived. Barely. She laughed. Alexander looked at the woman in his arms. Once, he had possessed wealth, land, power, servants, horses, and one of the oldest titles in England. He had believed those things made him rich. Then he nearly lost Clara. Only afterward had he understood what poverty truly meant. He kissed her hand. Clara tilted her head. What was that for? Alexander smiled. For choosing me. She shook her head. No, he frowned. No. Clara leaned closer. For becoming someone worth choosing. Beneath the golden lights of the ballroom, the Duke of Blackwood laughed. After all those years, his wife still refused to let him take credit for the wrong thing. And he loved her for it. Not because she had once been poor. Not because he had made her a duchess. Not because their story surprised society. He loved her because Clara Whitmore had never needed a title to know her worth. She had only needed time to find a man who understood it too. And Alexander Blackwood had needed almost losing her forever to understand the simplest truth of his life. The greatest privilege of being a duke was not having thousands of people obey him. It was being chosen freely by the one woman who never had to.